Celebration First Live, presented to you by La Pop. Be sure to find them on Instagram and in Durrell for the best chiropractic adjustments you could possibly ask for. We are here to preview the Washington Nationals series. We're here to review the San Diego Padres series. I'm here, as always, with our founder and managing editor, Mr. Eli Sussman, with our farm director, Alex Carver, and our great guest, Mr. Ryan Schlesinger. Very excited to have you on, Ryan. Thank you for coming on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm definitely nervous for this series, but you just got to keep doing what you've been doing against the Nationals. But this team has improved since the last time we saw them, and they're coming off a pretty solid series against the Yankees. And overall, in the whole month of August, they've been pretty good. So it's gonna be much tougher than previous Marlins National series.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The Washington Nationals are coming into Lone Depot Park very hot. They actually are tied with the New York Mets for last place in the National League East. Eli, what should we expect from this overperforming Nationals team?
Yeah, that's a good point that you raised, though, for people that are not familiar. They are tied with the Mets right now, the exact same record as them with, 34 games to play. That happened pretty suddenly for this to go on. They're an incomplete team. I don't think anybody is under the misrepresentation that they are like ahead of schedule. But I would say that their bullpen has been pretty good lately. And in their lineup, they now have a couple core guys really emerging. I mean, CJ Abrams is a guy we'll be talking about later in the show, where we got a taste of him last year. We kind of rushed to the big leagues with his original team, the Padres. He was included in that Juan Soto trade, but he has absolutely taken off, almost perfectly coinciding with this hot streak they've been on. So between him, Mackenzie Gore settling into their starting rotation, that was another piece of the same trade. And then around them, they just have enough solid pieces. I mean, Lane Thomas, wasn't he there? I don't know if he was their all-star or he just missed being an all-star, but he's been emerging as like a steady piece near the top of their lineup. Like offensively, they're kind of decent between him and Keibert Ruiz offensively. Like it's a team that's just gradually gotten a little bit better. Facing them at a very interesting time where this is the best extended stretch that the Nationals have had since like 2019, really. I mean, they really have not had a month plus like this, so much above 500 since well before they even won the World Series or kind of leading into that World Series. So it's interesting timing.
Yeah. Eli mentioned CJ Abrams, Alex Carver. The Marlins drafted JJ Bleday instead of CJ Abrams. What else besides him? Who else do you see on this Nationals team? You're muted.
There's a lot of guys here that are talents. They're talented kids. I mean, it's a younger team. It's a team that's still, I think, rebuilding a lot of their identity from where they were in 2019. They have a ways to go. I think this is a team that still has a bit of a ways to go. Obviously, sitting at 59 and 69, they have a bit of a ways to go to fully get back into a relative conversation, especially in the NL East. But you can tell that there's talent here. I mean, there definitely is. I really like Joey Meneses. I've liked him since the World Baseball Classic. That's a guy who really showed out for me. I've liked him most of the year. You like CJ Abrams, like you mentioned, Keibert Ruiz, like Eli mentioned as well. Carter Kieboom, that's a guy as well. I mean, he's kind of been up and down, between the majors and the minors and stuff like that. But he's another guy with talent that just needs time. There's talent here, like I said, for sure. But it's definitely a team that's still a little bit, I think, probably multiple years away from serious contention. But they definitely have their moments. So it's definitely not going to be a pushover series, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And before we get into the Nationals a little bit more later in the show, let's start with reviewing that tough series for Miami in San Diego. I was there covering all three. You thought that maybe after they won game 2 that they could come back and take the series after losing game 1, which is a trend for a little bit. The last 4 series, the last couple times that they've lost game 1, they come back and win the series. Didn't happen today, so I wasn't able to put it in my story. But Ryan, I'm sure you watched a lot of these games. Where did they go wrong here?
Yeah, it was just a pretty frustrating series overall. You felt like nothing could really go right at the same time. Game 1, they lose 4-0, and the offense was just completely dead. And then game 2, the Marlins win it 3-0. That was a very good game from Luzardo. Still, the offense, they got all 3 of their runs in 1 inning, and then they couldn't really score in the second half of the game. And then in game 3, they just struggled again. and a very rough game from Ryan Weathers, who Weathers, that's a whole nother conversation to bring up, but Weathers has really not been impressive.
Yeah, that project hasn't been going as smoothly as the Marlins would have hoped. Alex, you're a big San Diego guy. You used to reside there for a little bit. What did you see in this 3-game set?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I spent a long time there, 11 years. It's always a tough ballpark to hit in. But that, like I said at the start when we had our last show with Glenn, it's always been a tough park to hit in. It will continue to be, I think. Blake Snell, you run into a guy that has really kind of revived his career this year. He's had a really great year for San Diego. That guy's been super good. And you run into him and you do it because Luzardo, I think going into the series, I said I thought the Marlins would lose that game. Luzardo really surprised me. Really started reincorporating the changeup a bit more. That's a pitch that he's kind of struggled with, been up and down most of the year. Also commanded all 4 quadrants with the fastball. He was fabulous in that game, like Ryan said, really, really good. So I thought that was one of Luzardo's better showings of the year. This bullpen as well, like even though the Marlins lost the series, right? All series long, this bullpen was super good. You point to Brian Hoeing. Like, you guys know I like Brian Hoeing. I've been a Brian Hoeing fan for a while. That guy kept the team in the game. The offense just did nothing. So, like I said, at least Hoeing came in and for those, 4.1, 4.2 innings, whatever he threw, he kept that team in that baseball game, and that's his job to do that. So he was really great in that series. That sinker is dead nasty. Really great pitch for Brian Hoeing, and it's only gotten better this year. So really like that. It's gone from a ground ball pitch to a strikeout pitch, and that's super good for a guy that can just eat innings. If it's me, and I'm not Kim Ang, but if I'm in the GM seat, you send down Ryan Weathers, let him work his stuff out. Like Isaac said, that's a project. Go to a guy like Brian Hoeing, maybe George Soriano. I know he's on the maternity list now, which we'll get to probably in a second, but those 2 guys have really pushed their way. If the Marlins need starting pitching in innings, you can send down Weathers and let him work his stuff out as a longer-term project and go to guys like Hoeing and Soriano who are showing that they're ready right now. That's an opinion. But, yeah, I mean, the Luzardo start was very, very encouraging. And that's something to build off of for him. But I think Weathers should probably be in AAA for maybe a couple of those other guys, like I mentioned, Hoeing and Soriano in the rotation right now.
Yeah. First, I need to apologize to Ryan and our audience for mislabeling those games. The screenshots were in the wrong order. So I had game 3 as game 1. Game 1 is game 3. Right. I'm just noticing that they did get shut out very notably in the last game. And that led to the comments we heard from Sandy afterwards about getting no run support. It is, off the top of my head, the 4th time this year that Sandy has started a game and the Marlins have been shut out on the other side of that game. Carver mentioned the bullpen. You didn't highlight Andrew Nardi. Andrew Nardi in the one game that they won, making another big contribution. But in particular, his fastball velocity was the highest I've ever seen, not just in the majors, but at any other point in his career. He was sitting 98 miles an hour with his fastball from the left side. He was Josh Hader. He did his best Josh Hader impression right there, just overpowering guys with that velo that he has. I don't think he's looked 100% the same coming back from the IL as he was before until like this outing. Like, I think this outing kind of solidifies to me that, wow, he's back. He is, I think there's really no other way to look at it at this point, that he's probably a top 2 reliever in this bullpen. It's him and Tanner Scott. Those are the 2 guys that you trust the most out of everybody when he's fully healthy, and he demonstrated that he is. So that's one bright spot that stood out, is Nardi having that kind of impressive outing against the heart of the Padres lineup too. He faced Machado. I think he faced Bogarts and whoever was in between them. So and Soto. So that was a bright spot, I would say. Yeah. Other than that, touched on Luzardo pitching as well as he did, and just overall, this offense is in a weird spot. Isaac was on the whole road trip, and he saw one good game from the offense in the first game against Tony Gonsolin, who, as it turns out, was pitching through an injury. So they had an amazing game against him, but there's an asterisk on that because he was not the real Tony Gonsolin in that moment. He's since gone to the IL. He's probably out for the year. And in the other games, 7 games, and they score 5 total runs in those 5 games, even against some, not superstar opponents in that mix. So that's just really troubling. I thought we were in a point where this offense was deep enough that you wouldn't get these kind of stretches, that if there was 1 or 2 off nights in a row, maybe, but not 4 or 5 together. So that raises some concerns because that was a big emphasis at the trade deadline to add those bats. And to see them have a period like this where they just didn't give the team much of a chance to win, that's really concerning.
Yeah, and that question was obviously asked post game at the end of the series in San Diego. What happened? Are they not following the game plan? Like, no, we had the game plan, and that's the first time that I've seen Skip not call out his players directly, but say, they were not, following the game plan in these games. Swinging at curveballs 2-0, swinging curveballs 3-1 when you're not supposed to. And he did mention that, hey, if you're sitting on it, he has no problem with it. But a lot of these guys, he didn't name who, but a lot of them were not following the game plan they had set prior to the series and prior to the start against Lugo. Ryan, that brings me to my next question, I guess. What happened with this offense, not only against Lugo, not only against Michael Wacha, who aren't exactly, the aces of the team? Why couldn't they score?
Yeah, it was definitely a very, very, very frustrating series, and I'm not 100% sure what was really going wrong. Like you said, it was probably mainly the game plan just weren't sticking to it. I think they were getting pretty impatient, though. I saw a lot of swings early in the count, just a lot of weak fly balls and stuff like that. But overall, it's just very frustrating, and honestly, like it does surprise me because if you look at Friday's game where they scored all those runs against Gonsolin, yes, Gonsolin was injured and it was likely very easy to hit against him. But still, like you'd think that if they were able to hit all those home runs, they would kind of carry that momentum into the rest of that series and road trip overall. But then Saturday only 1 run. And then on Sunday, Sunday they didn't play. The second game of the Saturday, they also scored 1 run. So 2 runs in those final 2 games. And then it just, all those offensive struggles kind of carried into that Padres series where the offense was extremely mediocre for the first 2 games and then was completely shut out in the final game, the Sandy game.
Carver, anything to add?
No, just like Ryan mentions the Sandy game. I mean, yeah, he gives you what? I mean, give you a bunch of innings. Like innings were okay, but this wasn't like vintage Sandy that we're really used to seeing. I mean, if you look at the numbers from that game, he only got 8 whiffs. Like that's not the Sandy Alcantara that we're used to seeing. So this was definitely not Sandy at his best. But what I will side with him on is that when Sandy is not at his best, because he's been at his best a lot for this organization, when Sandy is not at his best, that's when you hope your offense shows up, and they didn't do it. So I totally get his sentiment, but just to call it out, like Sandy was not at his best again. And we've seen a lot of Sandy not at his best this year. So, yeah, I mean, it's been very up and down for Sandy Alcantara coming off the Cy Young. This was an offense coming in, like we mentioned in the preview show, we mentioned coming into the series that this is really kind of an offense that Sandy, even though they have a lot of names, it's an underperforming team. And he should have been able to take advantage of this moment, and he allows 4 runs. So, like I said, he definitely was not perfect, and this was kind of a spot where you would want to see him better than what he was. That's all.
I don't know how I didn't mention this, but also the most notable thing probably about this road trip on the offense outside of the first game of the road trip has to be just straining a ton of runners in scoring position. I mean, especially in some of those San Diego games, they were just not hitting with runners on. The most notable occurrence of that probably when Joey Wendell was up, bases loaded, 1 out. You didn't have a ton of confidence in Wendell, but to hit and do a ground ball double play, it should have been a base hit up the middle. It was hit 102 miles per hour. Very unlucky, but also just unluckiness and just terrible timed hitting.
Yeah, and I do think Carver was a little bit harsh on Sandy coming into that game. In his last 8 starts, he had been, like I said in my story, in the midst of his best stretch of this season. Granted, before that, the first half was not great for Sandy, but he had been really good his last 8 outings, and it was just tough to see. Like you said, it wasn't a perfect outing, but he gave the team, 6 2/3 innings. It was 1 run up until the 6th. He was perfect from innings 2 to 5 it was. And then shit hit the fan once Machado got some calls, and Manny Machado does not need any extra calls, and he got the frustrating walk. And I think that frustration led to a middle fastball to Xander Bogaerts, who's just not going to miss it.
I think the thing, honestly, that sticks out to me most, Isaac, is not that you have to go out and strike out 10 guys in every start. You don't. But against, like I said, against the struggling offense that was struggling coming into the series, that's kind of what you wanted to see, is a lot more whiffs from Sandy. And he really didn't have swing and miss stuff in the start. And to me, that's a little concerning. Yes, maybe the Padres got a little fortunate in some at-bats. I don't disagree with you, especially later in the game. But Sandy did give length. That's exactly what you needed, because you can't rely on the bullpen every single day, as good as they've been. So, yes, he did give you length, but it just wasn't the same dominant Sandy that we're used to. And against a struggling offense, to me, that's concerning.
Right. And Sandy's never known to get many whiffs, but to get just 8 against his team, I agree with you, Carver. Before we head into our press box report, Eli, is there anything else you'd like to add on Sandy?
Not on Sandy. I did want to mention this was the Garrett Cooper reunion. He had a really good interview with you, so people can find that on our YouTube channel if they're already here. That was a good conversation with Coop, and he was decent in the series. He played. Did he start all 3 games? At least 2 of them, and he had a couple walks. He had a couple of singles, so he's still around and doing his thing on a team that is still teetering at the very periphery of the wild card race. If nothing else, I just hope he finishes strong to kind of build up himself heading into free agency and is able to get himself a nice opportunity for next year someplace.
Yeah, 2 for 3 against Sandy, like you said. I asked him in that interview, you excited? Yeah, in the bright sun and 100-mile-an-hour bowling ball sinkers, not excited, but hey, he got a couple hits. I guess now it's perfect time to head into our press box report. We have the handsome Alex Krutchik on site for game 1 of a 3-game set between the Miami Marlins and the Washington Nationals. Hey, Alex, how's it hanging?
It's pretty good. Happy to be back at the ballpark after that long West Coast road trip. Excited to see what they can do against a Washington team that's in last place but is very hot right now.
Yeah, and I usually hate to ask questions like this, but vibes weren't at their highest after game 3 when Sandy got the loss, unfortunately. How are vibes today pregame?
Vibes are normal. I think they're just glad to be home, just like they always are after a long West Coast road trip. I definitely think they needed to get back home because those West Coast trips are tough, especially when the trip includes the Dodgers. 2 and 4 out there. All you want to do is get home. So, not great, not terrible. Just, I think, excited to be back in front of the home crowd.
Right. And anything during BP, or I guess we can go into injuries now. Kevin put out the injury report this afternoon. Anything that stood out to you guys?
Yeah, I think the biggest story of the day is that George Soriano, the reliable guy out of the bullpen, is going on paternity leave. So congratulations to him. It also opened up a spot for JT Chagua to come back from 60-day IL with a strained right rib cage, last pitch on August 5th. So, you lose one, but you get one back. They definitely miss Chagua. I think he's a pretty solid front-end bullpen pitcher. Anthony Bender's continuing to throw bullpens. Matt Barnes back in Miami to continue rehab. Huascar Brosvan was here at Lone Depot to continue rehab. And, pretty solid day of injury news, if there ever is one.
Yeah,
and Trevor finally started throwing. This is, I believe, the first step that he has taken in doing so several months after his most recent setback. So it still leaves a little bit of hope alive that he could be in the majors by the end of the year. But man, it is a long road back if he wants to, especially if he wants to get stretched out as a starter. But that's positive. I know that he didn't want to go into the offseason rehab mode. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he keeps progressing from here and is at least fully healthy by the end of the regular season.
Yeah, that would be huge. Even if he can just give them length and innings 2 or 3 times a week in those last couple weeks of the season, that would be huge.
Yeah, Kim was asked about Trevor Rogers in her media session a couple days ago, and she basically was non-committal to him coming back this year. That what's important with him is long-term with Trevor, and anything that they get this year is just gravy at this point. There are a couple of things I want to get to on this injury report, but this is not the first time that Sixto Sanchez has thrown live BP, right?
No.
No.
He loves throwing live BP, it seems. He's the MVP of live BP.
Right.
I do want to draw a distinction between bullpen sessions and live BP. He's going to face batters tomorrow. Not good batters, probably guys that are left over from the end of the FCL season, younger batters. And the last we saw of his bullpen sessions, it does not appear that his stuff has come back whatsoever yet. But this is actually a step compared to where he was, because I lose track of how many setbacks he's had, but he was supposed to do this a while ago, much earlier in the season, and now he's doing it. So it'll be fun if and when he appears in a minor league game. That's kind of the bar for the rest of his season, is just to make an affiliated official game appearance. But yeah,
might be-
I'm with Mega and a lot of other people in the chat. They don't want to hear more about Sixto. We don't want to encourage anything other than to say that he is still doing baseball stuff. So he is still an employee of the Marlins for now.
Yeah. Well, the one other thing I do want to get to.
And then also,
Go ahead. Al.
oh no, sorry. I was just gonna mention before you guys get me out of here. One, I don't know if you guys hit on it, but I really like the lineup that came out today. I'm glad that Arias is finally back in the 3 spot. I don't know if you guys mentioned his stats earlier in the 2 spot compared to the 3 spot, but his OPS hitting second compared to his relative OPS is -3 when he's hitting second in the lineup. His OPS when he's hitting third in the lineup is 125. Batting average hitting second for him is 188. Batting average hitting third is 381. Soler was doing pretty well in the leadoff spot, but I think for the good of the team as a whole, I'm glad that Arias was back in the 3 hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Skip mentioned that he was not going to move from the 1 or 2 spot when I asked him on Tuesday. He had been struggling mightily in that 2 spot in particular, and he was adamant. No, we knew he wasn't going to hit 400, but you won't see him move from that 1 or 2 spot. And as soon as they come home, that changed. The last thing I want to get to on this injury report is kind of a sad one. That that injury that happened to Avi Garcia, as soon as he stepped on first base, watching him grab that hamstring. Say what you want about the player, but it's never good to see a man go down that way, especially someone that missed almost 3 months of this season. He was injured a little bit last year. Is it fair to think about whether or not that was his last game as a Marlin?
I think it's fair because even before he got injured, he wasn't playing that well, and I think this might just be the nail in the coffin. I really liked what they did with the Gene Segura dump over to Cleveland, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do something similar over the offseason. I do want to say, and I don't know, again, if you guys touched on this earlier, it is a shame because Avi, whatever rumors were flying around about how he is as a teammate early in his career, that doesn't seem to be the case now. The guys in the clubhouse really like him a lot. The coaches all seem to really like him a lot. He is a very hard worker, and he did work really hard to get back this year, both in terms of health and in terms of skill. So it was sad to see him go down, but as hard as the guy works, he's just not the guy anymore. So I do hope that they do a Gene Segura type dump in the offseason. I would guess that that's his last appearance in a Marlins uniform.
All right, Eli, Ryan, and Alex, in that order, do you want to briefly touch on your thoughts if that's the last time we'll see Avi?
I'd have to agree. I think this is it for him. We'll see how his rehab goes, but if it's any significant severity of the strain, there's just not going to be time to even make it back by the end of the year. And I am not as optimistic about any trade scenarios. I think this is just too far underwater now that you've had back-to-back years where he's struggled so much when healthy. So I think it's just a matter of time, whether it is October or whether it is November or whether it is February. I think at one of those moments, he's going to get squeezed off of this Marlins roster, and they'll have to move on. Unfortunately, yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer, no doubt about it. I guess you just focus on the next man up in this situation, and they've had nice years from De La Cruz and Sanchez relative to expectations, and so you just want to focus on the corner outfielders that they have moving forward rather than holding on to what is looking like a pretty sunk cost at this point.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Eli here in where he said that he's not as optimistic about a trade scenario. I don't know how easy it would literally be to just trade Avisail Garcia like that. He is not on as big of a contract, nowhere near as big of a contract as Gene Segura was, and Gene Segura was also traded for Josh Bell, who was struggling and considered to be on a bad contract at that time. Now, of course, people are like, oh, maybe he'll opt out because he's hitting so well, but what can you really trade Avi Garcia for? I think the simple answer is that the Marlins are just going to have to DFA him, like Eli said, in one of the winter months, October. They'll just DFA him, have to eat the money after 2 years of baseball on and off the field for Avi Garcia with the Marlins, and I guess they'll just have to find a new job.
That's pretty sad. They got the guy on what they thought was an upswing. There was the whole thing with Odd Year Avi and, all that stuff that went into it. And Isaac's reporting of Skinny Avi coming into the year that we all remember from the parking garage and all that stuff. So we all hoped, but it just hasn't really worked out in the Marlins' favor. And like you guys were saying, this is a guy you still have to pay through 2025, and then if he exercises the player option through 2026. So it's a good time to get out. It's unfortunate. It's a 32-year-old player who just can't stay healthy. And when he is healthy, the production just isn't there. And like Eli was saying, you have other much younger outfielders who are pushing their way and earning time over him. So, yeah, I mean, you get out of the contract as soon as possible, in my opinion. It sucks. I was hoping that this guy would be good and return to his former glory, but it just didn't happen. So it happens in baseball. It's a bad contract. Bad contracts happen. You move on.
Yeah, very briefly, I'll just say that I respectfully disagree a little bit. I think you at least let him come to spring training next year and let him be that right-handed platoon option for Jesus Sanchez, or if De La Cruz needs a day off, or for Jazz Chisholm Jr., assuming you have another center fielder there. Because you know what, he was showing a little bit of some better swings, especially in that LA series. He was coming off a good game when he started, and then they just kept putting him in the ninth inning to finish the game, one at bat, and it's hard to get in a rhythm when you're only getting one at bat every few days. I think he would be a decent platoon option for Jesus Sanchez. So I believe that there is some value there with the power, speed, and decent right field defense that he can give you. So we'll see what they end up doing, but that's my thought on it. Alex, before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with us from Lone Depot Park Press Box?
No, nothing much. I guess it's if you're coming to the ballpark tonight, listen out for the walk-up songs. I suppose I always like when they add a little personal touch to the walk-up songs. They're doing all songs that are sung by women tonight to celebrate Women Empowerment Night. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then afterwards, they're having a cool drone show. So I'm excited to see that. I think it'll be a fun night at the ballpark.
Yeah, it's funny because just when we were in LA, the Dodgers had a Women Empowerment Night, and all the wives of the players chose their walk-up songs. I assume that's what they're doing with the Marlins. So I guess that's something to look forward to. Kevin, where the heck is he?
Oh, he's right here. Do you guys want to talk to Andres?
Sure.
We'll hear from them later in the prediction video. Andres is in there. Danny Alvarez is in there. And, of course, Krutchik and Kevin are in there.
All right. Krutchik, thank you so much. We appreciate you and enjoy the game.
And see you guys.
Yeah, to clarify this comment, they have post-game, they're going to open the roof and do a drone light show, they're calling it. So I guess it's a whole squadron of drones. They fly up there, and they're each in different colors. And they do something like that. A unique experience for sure.
Yeah. So from there, I guess we could go into Flipped Fish segment just before we get into our commercial break here. You guys all know about Flipped Fish. It's been getting started here on Twitter. People commenting their favorite player that played for both teams of the upcoming series. In this case, it is obviously the Nationals and Marlins. I went with Dan Ugla. There's a bunch of names. Really quick, Ryan, if you want to give a name you'd like there, an obscure one.
Yeah. I didn't really go too obscure. I went with D. Gordon. I know he didn't spend a ton of years with the Nats. I was debating, since I'm a newer Marlins fan, so I not really like Dan Ugla or Livan Hernandez, who I sent Livan on Immaculate Grid today, actually, but can't really go with them because they played on the Marlins before I was even alive. So I just said D. Gordon because why not? Great, fun player.
You know what? I like the fact that you stay true to your, tenure of a fan. I like that very much. Carver, who'd you go with?
Jeez, man, Ryan's making me feel so old. Anyways, I said Austin Kearns in your post, kind of in jest. But I would probably go with either Emilio Bonifacio, and just because Yuri's pitching in this series, I'll go with the one player taller than him to pitch for the Marlins, and John Roush. Those would be my guys. Yeah.
Good one. And I know Eli went with Kyle Barraclough, who was traded to the Marlins for international slot money, which eventually turned into Victor Mesa and Victor Mesa Jr. So we have him to thank for that. If you have the Baseball Reference screenshot for this player that shall not be named, you guys, whoever's watching, can put a guess out on the comments. And if you win, you win.
Yeah. So we give you guys this hint going into the break. Former player that played for the Marlins and the Nationals. We have a catcher this time, a Colombian catcher, debuted in 2012, finished playing in 2015. Just a terrible hitter, even relative to other catchers, but parts of, 4 seasons in the majors, and he played for both of these teams. So you guys, You can see it right there. We're going to go to the break. Coming out of the other side, we'll see what the chat has to say. And figure out who this player is. Flipped fish every single series. We're going to do this through the rest of the season. We'll be back in 30 seconds with the identity of this player. Stay with us.
All right. Well, we already have a few guesses down there in the comments. It is not Jorge Alfaro. It is not. It is not Sandy Leon. You know, in the future, I want to take off showing the position. I think that makes it easier too.
I don't know. Well, LMF got it. Jonathan Solano, it is indeed.
There you go. Yeah, I was gonna say I knew this. Danny, my buddy Danny, wouldn't forgive me for being from Barranquilla. He would not have forgiven me if I didn't know this. But yeah, it's Jonathan Solano, for sure.
From Barranquilla, Colombia, same place as my dad was born. The brother of Donovan Solano, another former Marlin. So I did not think anyone would get that. We do give a little bit extra hints here with that screenshot, like the position, like the place of birth, like the war, and I guess the negative, I think it was 0.6 war, sort of made it a little bit gettable for Jonathan Solano. Very short tenure. He played regular season ball with Miami, no? Or was it just spring training?
No, he did. He did.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been eligible for this unless he played in the regular season.
20 at bats with the Marlins. He was 1 for 20 with
2 career home runs. 2 career home runs.
Yeah, but good contact skills. A lifetime, 12% strikeout rate, and with the Marlins, he only struck out once in all those at bats.
Hey, he got more hits. He has as many hits as strikeouts.
Yeah.
All right, you take that. Another edition of Flip Fish, and from there, we can go into the Marlins facing this Nationals team that's since 2020 have just dominated this ball club. It's not the same ball club that they've been facing the last couple of years, especially shortly after that World Series run for Washington. Eli, what does that have anything to do with this series?
Probably not a ton, although we have seen it as recently as the first half of this year. It's more than 2 months ago, though, as you see. In May and in June, these teams met. The Marlins won all 6 of those head-to-head meetings between them. And, I mean, the main changes, too, there haven't been a ton of changes to the Nationals roster since then. They shed some dead weight with, I think, Corey Dickerson is gone. And then aside from that, it's a lot of familiar faces. Oh, and, of course, Jeimer Candelario. I mean, Candelario was their best player, actually, during the first half of the season when the team was, for the most part, just non-competitive. So interesting that when Candelario gets traded to the Cubs, that they take off kind of without him. And they had to move him. He was a pending free agent. Otherwise, it wasn't a team that changed a whole lot over the course of the year, other than just young players getting better. CJ Abrams, we already mentioned him. But depending on what defensive metrics you look at, he's a 2-WAR player on Fangraphs. He's a 3-WAR player on Baseball Reference. I generally don't like his defense a lot, but offensively, he is so electric. He's a great runner. He has, for a skinny guy, he generates such incredible bat speed. For him to, how many home runs does he now have? 14 home runs. For somebody that I think the only really knock on him as a prospect, the main knock was the lack of power and the expectation that he'd never have much power. So that has been a pretty critical difference for him. Since then, a lot of these were close games, though, as you see earlier this year. And the same kind of applies to last year as well, when they went 15-4 against the Nats. Not a ton of blowout games between these two. A lot of it comes down to the bullpen. And, with this Marlins team, there have been times this year, I guess you could say that mid-May was kind of the peak of this Marlins bullpen, when you felt confident in just about everybody. And they haven't really been firing on all cylinders since then. We talked about Andrew Nardi and Tanner Scott is kind of in that same conversation. But once you get past that, there's just a lot of guys that are inconsistent with this team. And that's going to make it more difficult for them to win close games. It has been a reason why the Marlins, since the All-Star break, are one of the worst teams in baseball, because their bullpen is kind of up and down. So that is one critical difference. I think you look at both sides. I don't think the Marlins are a worse team than they were earlier this year, but the bullpen was a big reason why they were winning those games early in the season. And entering this weekend, I don't know if you feel the same supreme confidence in them if it's a close game getting towards the very end.
Yeah, if there's one thing that the Marlins definitely have over this Nationals team at the moment, it's the Nationals bullpen is it's pretty shitty, for lack of a better term. Ryan, are you confident in going into this weekend?
Well, if you mention the Nationals bullpen not being very good and just overall, I'm not too confident, but at the same time, I just genuinely don't know how to feel because the Marlins have pretty much owned the Nationals this season in only 6 games. This will be the 7th tonight. And then all of last season, they were dominant. That's the only reason why the Marlins won above 65 games last season is because of their dominance against the Nationals. But yet tonight, the Nationals have kind of a reliever starter, young guy who made his debut in 2021. So they should be able to get some hits off him. And then they will face Irvin tomorrow night, pitcher with a 4.47 ERA, should be pretty hittable. And then they will face Williams on Sunday. So, and that's a pitcher with a 4.95 ERA. So overall, all 3 of the starters for the Nationals, they're not too good. So if there's a series where the Marlins bats can wake up after a pretty rough road trip outside of that one game against Gonsolin where he was clearly pitching through injury and just throwing batting practice to the Marlins. I mean, even Jacob Stallings hit a home run off him. But yeah, so if there's a series that the bats can catch fire, it's definitely going to be this series just based off the pitching matchups, the starting pitchers for the Nats, and then obviously their bullpen that has been pretty bad outside of their closer Kyle Finnegan, who's been really good this season.
Yeah, Alex, if you remember, I think if we remember, the Marlins have 2 players that have homered off this young man, Adon, and that's Jazz and Nick Fortes have both taken this man deep. And if you guys remember last year, that team meeting happened, and the game that took place right after that was against the Nationals, where the Marlins came out on all cylinders. Do you agree with Ryan that this is a series where, hey, if they're going to wake up, it's going to be against these 3 starting pitchers?
Yeah, I do agree with that because as you can see on the screen with their pitching stat leaders, you're getting Jake Irvin. That's the one guy you're getting, right? You're not getting Gore, you're not getting Gray, you're not getting Corbin. Maybe you get Finnegan if the Nationals are ahead late, but and maybe Harvey in some situations. But the only guy on this list that you're getting as a starting pitcher is Jake Irvin. So you need, who doesn't really strike out a ton of guys, as you can see, a 19.1 strikeout rate. Walk rate is okay. Gets a little lucky with a 286 BABIP. So like I said, with a 5.3 FIP. So, I mean, with a 4.47 ERA and a 5.3 FIP, it's a guy you need to take advantage of. So these are pitchers you need to take advantage of if you're the Marlins offense. Can they do it? It's another question. This offense has been pretty suspect, is what I would say lately. We see them, Sandy's complaining about run support. He has every right to do that. It's a team that didn't score a lot of runs against the Padres. Will they do it against the Nationals? Again, in another pitcher-friendly environment in Lone Depot? Questionable. So again, this is not a push. We said it at the start. This is not a pushover series for the Marlins. You would like to think that this is a pushover series for the Marlins because of who they're facing on the pitching side, but I really don't think it is. So my confidence is about 60-40 in favor of the Marlins, but I don't want to give my prediction away, but maybe 60-40 at best is my confidence in the Marlins in the series.
That's fair. And just to address this question here from Marlins After Dark, Mr. Sean, both Skip and Kim said that it's not been solidified yet. You got Bryson tonight, Yuri tomorrow. Got a lot of messages on Twitter saying it's going to be Edward Cabrera. It will not be Edward Cabrera. It will most likely be Brian Hoeing, some sort of bullpen game with him getting the bulk of it. I think he's earned it, especially at home. I think you're a little more comfortable giving him that start against this team at home. So I look out for him to get a majority of those innings on Sunday afternoon. And then you get another off day. So Miami did sort of save their pen a little bit. I think it was one of the games in LA. It was just Sandy and Hoeing. And then again, the same thing in San Diego. It was just Sandy and Hoeing again. Sandy and Puck. It was on Wednesday. So you didn't use many relievers for many innings over that 6-game road trip. From there, I guess we could just talk about really quickly if this Nationals team, are they going to be contenders next season?
They need a lot of help on the starting pitching side. Either that or they need Gore and Gray to both continue to take another step forward next year. And even with that, they're going to need some help over there. I mean, Patrick Corbin is still in their rotation. I don't know how seriously you can take him if he's still starting every single 5th day for them. And Dominic Smith has been an everyday first baseman for them. They have some big holes that they can address by spending money. We didn't get into the Steven Strasburg news about him retiring, and that he's going to make a formal announcement about that soon with him. And they are trying to defer some of the money in his deal. That would make it easier for them to spend more in the present term to address some of these holes. I mean, that's been one of the reasons why, the team has been, they kind of spent themselves into a bit of a rebuild here between that contract and the Corbin contract, getting just no positive value from those other than Corbin's empty innings. But they have hope. Stone Garrett is somebody else we should touch on who's been in the news, because I was watching live when he broke his leg. He broke his leg trying to rob a home run, a very awkward jump. A former Marlins prospect who, as you can see here, he was one of their better hitters this year before his injury. A really cool story, and you hope he comes back. He'll still be under club control. I think he's just a platoon bat long term, but he's a really good platoon bat for the way that he can slug against left-handed pitching. I mean, they have some pieces to address, but they're going to need to go outside the organization a little bit more, or they're going to have to hope that some of their top prospects really deliver. They do have some extremely high-end prospects in the system. Dylan Cruz was their top pick in this past draft. He's at AA. He is believed to be an extremely well-rounded player who could be quick to the big league. So he should be up at some point next year. And other than him, they both James Woods and Elijah Green. One of those two is having a bad year. I forget which one.
Elijah.
I think Elijah Green is having the bad year, and James Woods he's one that has supreme upside in him, but he's at the AA level right now. So we might see him by the end of next year. Their outfield is extremely bright. And we mentioned CJ Abrams at shortstop. It's the rest of their infield that is a little bit dicey at the moment. So the question is how much money they spend. This is an organization that I think was looking to sell at this time a year ago, the Lerner family, and they didn't yet. So I think they still have some big questions to address. I won't get too far ahead of themselves in terms of making this quick rebuild, but it's intimidating for the Marlins, because as we've talked on this show, the Marlins don't have nearly the same impact coming from their farm system in the coming years. So this is kind of a window while the Nats are still building up, and while the Mets took an unexpected step back, there's this little window for the Marlins to be the third best team in that division. And I think they are, despite the way things are trending, I do think they're still going to finish very comfortably third in this division. And they have a good opportunity to do that next year as well. But they need to take advantage of it, because eventually I think this team is going to, as long as they're managed appropriately and get a good look on their side, they're going to be a very difficult team to contend with.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Ryan.
I got to agree with what Eli said about how they still have a lot of holes. So it's very hard to know how good they will actually be next season. I think 2025, if anything, would be what you would look at once some of their AA prospects start really coming up and turning into something major league level at a minimum. Then that would be the year where the Nationals could maybe, again, 2025, very far away, they can maybe compete for the division depending on how the Braves pan out, even though they have a lot of those guys under control. We don't know how everything will play out, but they'll at least be competing for a while spot, I think, in 2025. But yeah, I definitely think that over the offseason, the Nationals should have a starting pitcher. There are some guys going into the free agency market, not too much special. We'll have to see if guys like Eduardo Rodriguez opt out. He could opt out of his contract with Detroit this offseason. Then Marcus Stroman has a player option with the Cubs. So there are some guys, if they opt out or waive their player option. And then, but one guy they should probably look at, who they could get for maybe a little less money than most baseball fans expected that he would go for going into the season, is Julio Urias, who's kind of having a down year because he does still have a ton of potential to be a really good pitcher at the probably he could be like a top 20 starter in all of Major League Baseball when he's really on, but he just had a little bit of a down year with the Dodgers. So I think Urias, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason, I think the Nationals should try and sign him.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what you guys were saying. I like I said at the beginning, I really don't think for 2024 they'll be competitive. I think they'll be better because of what we see with prospects. A guy that Eli didn't mention is Brady House. I think that guy's well ahead of schedule, and they have a true question mark at their base. So again, we talked about Keyboom earlier, who is back and forth. I think Brady House is a sure thing. So that guy's been really good. He's at Double A and killing it. I think what Ryan said, though, about them adding a starter will need to be true. What they had a lot riding on coming into this season was Cade Cavalli, who left with Tommy John surgery. So that guy was going to be ready this year. He did really well in minor league baseball, and he lost an entire year because of Tommy John surgery. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes back. But I definitely think that they need to add starting pitching, because the next line of starters in their minor league system, they're a long ways away. So they're going to need to add pitching first. But I think they have the offense in their organization to be competitive by 2025, as Ryan was saying. So I definitely agree with both Eli and Ryan on this factor for the Nationals. But it's not going to be a team that's far away forever. I think they're at maximum, I think that they're at 2025, they'll be very good as long as they can make the most of their offseason this year.
And you know what? Dylan Cruz will be making his major league debut at some point in 2024.
Absolute stud. Yeah, stud.
I am almost sure of it. It's such a fun draft this was, whether it's going to be Skeens or Cruz or the UF guy. For everyone thought it was going to be him for a little bit. But let's get into these lineups. And you know what? I will say that I believe that this is the best Marlins lineup that they could possibly put out at this stage of the season. They did shift some guys around. It's no longer a rise in the 1 or 2 spot. You got Jazz leading off, which I don't know how we'll feel about that. I'll ask you guys in a second. Soler 2, Arise 3, Bell, Berger, Dela Cruz 6, and the 7, 8, 9 of Sanchi, Fortes, and Birdie in the 9 spot. Eli, do you agree this is the best possible lineup this team could put out?
I like it a lot. I do. There's no perfect fit here for the leadoff spot with this team, but I think Jazz is the best choice at this time, obviously being against a right-handed pitcher in this instance. Rise is unfortunately, this is the biggest slump that he's had as a Marlin. It's been an extended period of time where he's not getting hits and he's not drawing walks either. And so that combination makes it just really difficult to put him at the top right there. And with Soler, he's had some success in the leadoff spot as well. But as long as he's hitting early on in the lineup, it's hard to complain. And in terms of the other choices in here, those are pretty simple. To play Fortes over Songs and to play DLC and Sanchez over Hampson and to play Birdie over Wendell. This is I think the best that they can do under these particular circumstances. And we'll see how it goes. They don't perfectly fit together in here, but I would have a hard time imagining this. I think this is a matchup, more importantly, the matchup than the lineup, but I think the conditions are set for them to have a better day offensively than they've had the previous 5 games, at least.
Yeah. Ryan, you want to touch on the lineups?
I think it's a pretty good lineup. Like what Eli said, I don't think it's really possible to make a much better lineup than this at this stage of the season with the active roster that they have right now. I know he doesn't walk a ton, but something that I just I could throw this out there. The Marlins have liked to kind of switch around their leadoff hitters, and if they still don't feel too confident about having Jazz in the leadoff spot every day that he starts, what if Jake Berger could be in a leadoff spot? I know that Jake Berger has been a power hitter who strikes out a ton, but recently he's been making really good contact with the ball. He had a league-leading hitting streak at one point until he snapped it in the Padres series. So maybe at least for maybe just one game, they try Jake Berger in that leadoff spot and then kind of stuff Jazz, Soler, Bell, and Arise right at the middle of the lineup.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Berger. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. There's no perfect answer here. And with Jazz, the case you can make is maybe putting Birdie at the top of the lineup. You look at Birdie's season; he's just not doing much against right-handed pitching. He gets a lot of singles, but he doesn't really do anything above that, and he's not running with the same frequency as Jazz is when he does get on. There's just no perfect solution here, and I think, like it or not, Jazz, once he came back from his injury, and it's going to continue to be the case, Jazz is going to have a huge impact on whether this team makes the playoffs or not, because he has the potential to be an amazing all-around offensive player, and we haven't really seen much of that this year. It's been sporadic. This is the shot you have to take, and I'm okay with him taking that shot and just seeing whether he reaches that upside we'll see tonight. It's a very favorable matchup for him against a guy he hit a grand slam against last year. Yeah. So as long as I'm fine with this. I understand there's no like way to make us fully comfortable with it, but I think this is the best they can do under the circumstances.
Yeah, for the guy that strikes out 31% of the time,
Absolutely,
and who doesn't seem to, just see what the team needs at the moment and shorten that swing until he gets to 2 strikes. When you simply need a base runner, he seems to always be swinging out of his shoes. So I don't know how I feel about it personally. I think 5-6 is the perfect spot for Mr. Jazz Chisholm. He's looked great, granted, but I don't know if the leadoff spot is for him. And when it comes to Berger, I think you finally saw him struggle us a bit as a Marlin in that Padres series, just really sitting fastballs and whiffing on those changeups. Carver, if you have any thoughts on the lineup, we could jump right into predictions.
No, I just the previous commenter before TP Joseph, I 100% agree with this commenter. I forget the name, sorry about that, but he's 100% right. I know, like Eli was saying, Arias has been in a slump. You don't take a pure on-base guy out of the spot where he's most comfortable, and he's most comfortable in the leadoff spot. So I 100% disagree with leading off with Jazz Chisholm. Even though, like Eli said, the matchup may be a little favorable or whatever it may be. This guy has in the leadoff spot in his career in the leadoff spot is a 300 on base percentage. He's got a bunch of home runs in that spot. The leadoff spot isn't a spot for home runs. You got to get guys on base. And the best guy that gets on base on this team, even though he is slumping, is Luis Arias. You leave him where he's comfortable. I don't like him in the 3rd spot at all. Like Kretschuk was saying, I really don't agree with it, even though the stats favor that. I love him in the leadoff spot. He's a pure leadoff hitter. He does not hit for power. Jazz hits for power. That's one thing that he does do very well because he swings so hard. Leave him in the 3 spot. Minimum, like the lowest he should be, or the highest he should be, is in the 3 spot. And the lowest that he should be is probably 5 or 6. So it's a guy that should be deeper down in the lineup. It's not an on-base threat. I don't like this lineup at all because of that reason. And then the other thing I'll mention that wasn't called out, I know they had a day off, but I really hope Nick Fortes is okay because that was a scary injury. So the rest of the lineup is okay, but when you're leading off with a guy that is not an on-base threat, that's a problem. I don't like it.
All righty. Well, with that negative Nancy, we can head right into predictions. I don't disagree with you, Carver, much at all on that one, honestly. But it's time for predictions, our favorite part of the show.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
I noticed the new little firework thing you put there with prediction time. Or
That's not new. I think that's been here for most of the year. It's not brand new. It's been there a little while.
Sugar. I feel like a capital now. All right. Well, like always, the guest of honor, Mr. Ryan from Marlins I can't pronounce. Marlins HQ.
Not him yet. We got some other stuff to get to. We got to get to the other super subscribers and see what they had to say. This is a few. I missed a couple that submitted them at the very end here, but we have quite a bit of confidence in the Marlins from these predictions, except for that's Marcelo DeVivo, MDV. He's very negative by nature, and we respect that. Parker Heiser is kind of the same way, both of them. But they're the 2 negative guys almost every single series I pick against this team. And I mean, they've been right recently a lot since the All-Star break. So I can't blame them very much. People can go fishonfirst.com, become a super subscriber. It's right there at the top of every page of our site, including the homepage. And you can sign up for as little as $3 a month to participate in prediction time with us all season long. Really quickly, just take a look at the updated leaderboard. I think this is fully updated with Daniel Rodriguez claiming the top spot there. And Ryan himself, he's still got a chance. It's still wide open here as we get late into the year. But yeah, we combine our staffers and our super subscribers on this leaderboard on the site over the course of the season.
Yeah, look at how many generous super subscribers we've got. Like we said, just as little as $3 a month. You get unlimited access to our GIF database. I'm having trouble today. And many more perks that you get like that, like priority speaker in our State of the Fish spaces on Sundays, and much more.
Yeah, a pretty cool development. I think on Twitter, they finally allowed you to host and speak on spaces from your computer. That's big for me. I really appreciate that. So we're going to try that out on the next show pretty soon. That might be either Sunday or Monday. We haven't decided on the next show, but that's a big step forward that we appreciate.
Indeed. Yeah, that's huge. I remember in spring training, we were trying to do it on the computer. We weren't able to. So with that, I think it's time for
It is, but we go first to our press box video, and then we'll go into our own. So we got two of our staffers and two special guests from Lone Depot Park.
Oh,
All right, Marlins Nationals, 3-game set. I'll go first. I think the Marlins will sweep, and my MVP will be Jazz Chisholm Jr.
Hey, I'm Alex Krutchik. I'm going to guess Nationals get 2 of 3, but I do think the MVP of the series is going to be Josh Bell. I think he's going to rake against his former team.
I think the Marlins are going to take 3 of 2, and the MVP is going to be Luis Arraez.
I think the Marlins sweep, and the MVP is Josh Bell. Bye.
All right, Eli, back to you.
3 of 2. That may be our first 3 of 2 prediction.
Yes, I was sent a clarification afterwards that Andres picked the Marlins to win 2 out of 3. As she might have.
I don't know what's worse, a 3 of 2 prediction or Danny and Isaac making Claudia drive to Petco Park. But I guess that could be a conversation for another day.
No. We did not make her. She refused to let us drive because the car was in her name.
All right. So you say. Anyways, let's go.
All right.
We want to start with that.
I'll let Eli, or I guess I'll do it. All right. Let's start with Mr. Farm Director. Right. No, I'm just kidding. Alex Carver.
Yeah, something like that. But I'll go with the Marlins. This is a series that they need to get against these pitchers that they're facing. So Marlins, 2 out of 3, not 3 out of 2. And I'll go with MVP, guy that's having a fantastic stint as the Miami Marlins since he's been here. Jake Berger, MVP.
All righty, Mr. Ryan. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm kind of the opposite of some of those guys over on Twitter who are negative about the Marlins and always picking against them. I like strictly picking for them unless they're playing a really tough team, and I'm going to keep up that trend like I usually say. I'm going Marlins 2 out of 3. Here's MVP. I'm going to agree with Kevin. I got Jazz Chisholm Jr. taking home the series MVP.
All righty, let's go to myself here. I think that the Marlins have an opportunity to sweep this team, and they need to sweep this team. Against these 3 starting pitchers, Miami will win 3-0, and the MVP will be Josh Bell. Let's go with Josh Bell. And our father, Eli Sussman.
I have the Marlins winning this series as well, winning 2 out of 3. MVP going to Brian De La Cruz. I like lifting up the guys that are in a bit of a slump. And so Arraez is slumping. We've seen that. But DLC also under the radar, not playing up to his standards. I think that begins to turn around this weekend.
All righty. And with that, are there any last things you guys would like to add? Mr. Ryan, anything you'd like to say?
No, that's pretty much it.
All righty.
We didn't even talk about Yuri Perez. What I would say very briefly before we close out, proved why in his last start he should not have been shut down. I think he's back. I think he's for real, and he's going to be even better this start. I think he's going to do the same thing this start and be very good.
Yeah, Kim's quote on his last start exactly were something else. She very impressed with this young man, and they're going to have to play it by ear with how they let him keep running. It's hard to balance that a playoff push with, limiting the innings of arguably your best pitcher.
Better not do it again. That's all I got to say.
All right. All righty. That should do it for Mr. Eli, Carver, Ryan, and myself. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, go fish.